I felt like I was in a whole new planet the instant I entered my new place of employment. I'm Lucas, and I'm 32 years old. I recently moved to work as a programmer at a game development business. I was working somewhere else at first, but I ended up moving here because of some circumstances. I genuinely regretted arriving on my first day, but I didn't really have an option. One of the reasons was that I felt like I had a lot of people working against me. I was hired in the middle of my career, and I'm currently disturbed by my coworker Linda's presence. At 30, she is 2 years younger than me. She has a model's form and facial attributes, making her quite appealing if she doesn't speak. She is a programmer, just like me, which astonished me. I thought she was in a more public-facing position, such as public relations. She is basically my immediate senior. Linda seemed to have a strange dislike for her male coworkers. She may have gone through some tough times in the past, but that is unrelated to me. However, I am now the target of Linda's annoyance and rage. The scenario is completely irrational. It's reasonable to think that I shouldn't have come in these conditions. Don't stand there thinking about nothing. When you sit at your work in the morning, you don't expect someone to bring you coffee, do you? Linda yelled at me this morning as soon as I got to my desk. The fact that Linda's seat is directly next to mine is the worst. I don't think that at all, I said tactfully, and Linda gave a snort of approval. She continued to observe my every action rather than beginning her own task. Every morning, this nitpicking and searching for errors takes place. She gossips to everyone and exaggerates, even if it's not done her way or isn't an error. I feel like I've been branded as the inept team member at work because of Linda. I'm confined to running errands and doing mundane chores every day. Nathan Carter, a friend from middle school, introduced me to this company. I'm not sure how Nathan spent his time in college because we attended different institutions. He has been with this game company since founding it while still in college. We hadn't communicated for a long time until 6 months ago. He requested my assistance in raising the caliber of the programming team. I came to this company with the intention of helping Nathan. I wanted to communicate with my coworkers without any prejudices, so when I joined, I instructed Nathan not to treat me any differently. But Linda has thrown that plan into a loop. I'm trying to think of what I should do next. We were all anticipating the arrival of some sort of brilliance because everyone was saying, President Carter stole you from another company. However, we only received an errand runner. What? To ensure that people could hear her, Linda purposefully spoke loudly to me. She was talking loudly so the other coworkers could hear her, and anyone could see it. An angry response would be immature. Linda is really unrelenting in her criticism of me, but I've chosen to ignore her comments. Are you avoiding my presence? Lucas, I'm speaking to you. Even though I'm younger, I'm your senior in this organization. It wouldn't hurt to have a little respect, she added obnoxiously. This must be a senior who irritates people. I gave Linda a small grin and carried on ignoring her as though nothing had occurred. I switched on my computer and got to work on my daily task. Seeing that I was not responding, Linda continued, You better take your work seriously. You'll never catch up to us otherwise. And then she got up to leave her seat. I can work in peace at last. I let out a little sigh of relief. Nathan remarked, Hey, you look down. By the evening, I was exhausted from putting up with Linda's sarcasm all day. I appeared to be deep in contemplation, despite the fact that I was seeing Nathan for dinner for the first time in a long time. Did I look that way? My response was, just a bit tired. Maybe you're just not used to the air in America anymore, Nathan remarked, grinning meaningfully. I could tell by his expression that he was still clinging to the memory of my covered application and attendance at a foreign university. Why is that tone used? Are you still harboring resentment? I inquired. Nathan is often a straightforward and decent guy, but when this subject is brought up, he changes. Nathan apparently had other ideas. He wanted us to go to the same institution and launch a business together. It was Nathan's dream and his strategy. He ought to have informed me sooner about something so crucial. This is not the place to expect someone to read between the lines. I wanted to try something different, so I enrolled in a university overseas. I always thought I belonged elsewhere more than in the United States. That's what I faintly assumed because I'm not very sensitive to other people's subtle feelings. But I've kept it a secret for another reason. Because you went abroad for university, my startup was delayed by 2 years, Nathan stated, his wine-induced peripheral vision a little blurry. Aren't you drinking too much, buddy? As he grabbed for the wine bottle to refill his empty glass, I warned him, You've never been good with alcohol. This is the only way I drink here. The food and wine are so delicious that I always end up drinking too much, which may be the owner's taste, Nathan remarked. I had to concur with Nathan's statement. Nathan took me here for the first time after I got back to America, and it's a really cozy spot. The inventive French food offered here is quite tasty. The second bottle of the wine that was chosen to go with the meal is nearly empty. Nathan praising me makes me smile. From behind me came the voice of a young woman. Nice to meet you. My name is Chris. Madison. As she offered her name, the woman said, smiling and glancing at my face. I was surprised because I recognized the name from the contract. Madison, the proprietor, is a female. Without a doubt, I thought it was a man. I was so shocked, sir, that I unintentionally let my actual thoughts out and hastily put both palms over my lips. Maybe he thought I was funny, because Chris laughed hard. Then she pulled out a chair and took a seat next to me. It's because Chris is my name. She rested her elbows on the table and gazed up at me with a playful twinkle in her eye, saying, I frequently get that reaction. She gave me what appeared to be a humorous glance. She seemed a little annoyed, even though she claimed to hear it frequently. But Chris is such a beautiful name for a woman, isn't it? Those words just fell out without praise. I was taken aback by myself. Chris's eyes whitened even further, as if she was as shocked. She smiled and said, I'm happy, even if it's just flattery, and she looked really lovely to me. She was quite likable because of how effortlessly and genuinely her expressions altered. Chris was the one who, on a whim, gave me the money for my startup. According to Nathan, she is also the owner of my business and this location. It was clear from Nathan's tone that Chris was a successful businessman. Although she appeared younger than us, she must have a talent for business. She may have been in middle school or maybe high school when Nathan was in college. It was unclear how she came up with enough money to launch a firm in that short time. The mystery just became more complex. Don't worry, it's not shady money, Chris humorously remarked, seemingly able to read my mind. The only thing I've figured out from our first meeting, I replied. Chris said, You figured out something already, with a delighted tone. It gave me the impression that she liked to talk. I've realized you're a woman full of mysteries, I responded. Chris gave me an enigmatic smile in response. After I responded with a profound laugh, Chris reached for the wine glass that was left on the table with her pale hand. Chris's pale palm was beautifully illuminated by the dim light that filtered through the crimson wine. It was quite lovely and sat comfortably. Faintly conscious of my anticipation of her next words, I watched Chris carefully take a sip of wine. Women are made of mysteries. Men are silly. It is scarcely worth describing a woman who is completely understandable, she said. I could relate to her response. I felt compelled to treasure this pleasant chat even more after being badgered and chastised all day. Hey, am I intruding here? Nathan interrupted, seeming a little irritated as though he had been excluded from Chris and my conversation. Are we being a bother? Nathan said, Hey, in frustration as we both answered. As we were leaving, Chris had quietly given me her private phone number, which Nathan, who was intoxicated, was unaware of. The following day expected the same gloomy morning despite the amazing meeting. Luckily, I've never had a hangover, and have always had a high tolerance for alcohol. Arriving at work a few minutes after me, Nathan was slumped over his desk in anguish and looked awful. I told him, "You drank too much," and set a bottle of mineral water and some hangover medication on his desk. "My bad," Nathan said as he took the medication gently, his voice scratchy from the drink. I remarked, "I'd hate to call it a favor, but I'm looking for some information," to Nathan, who was gasping for air after consuming 500 milliliters of water. Nathan's response, "I can give you any information about Chris. I've been sworn to secrecy," made me click my tongue in exasperation. Chris appears to have outpaced me. Now, determining how to handle this circumstance turns into a difficult conundrum. Right now, Nathan is my sole trustworthy information source. President Carter hung over again. Between Nathan and myself, Linda stepped in. In an effort to facilitate employee consultation, Nathan's desk is on the same floor as ours, despite his designation as president. In comparison to other organizations, this lowers the perceived hierarchical barrier. Maybe that's why Linda frequently speaks casually to President Nathan. "Should I get you another bottle of hangover medication? Do you also need water and energy drinks?" Nathan must be suffering from a hangover on a regular basis. With a frustrated expression on her face, Linda spoke to Nathan while holding her adorable pink wallet in both hands. "I usually feel horrible about this, but I'll be all right starting today." Nathan pointed to me and added, "My wife is here to take care of me." It was always Nathan who got into trouble when we used to hang together, and I was responsible for cleaning up after him. It brought up memories of being referred to as his wife. As it turned out, I had unintentionally made mineral water, vegetable soup, and hangover medication. Linda gave me a disgruntled frown after noticing these things arranged on the desk. Her icy demeanor toward me may have been influenced by Nathan's presence, I realized from that expression. "So, I'm not needed then. I suppose I'll just cover for you with errands, since I'm not useful for the work," Linda remarked, crossing her arms over her chest. It was obvious from her posture that she was ignoring me entirely. Linda responded condescendingly, "Well, the underling should learn by watching my work and pick up the skills," and Nathan gave me a look as though he had something to say. I simply gave his eyes a small shake of my head. "I'm always learning from you," I smiled in response, sensing that her irony was not being understood. After making a gentle tongue click, Linda left Nathan's desk. "Is that okay with you?" Nathan questioned as I saw her retrenchment. "It's all right for now. I have plans of my own," I informed him. Although it's not yet appropriate to disclose my genuine goals, Nathan must have felt something when he saw his close friend denigrated in front of him. Nathan called me back to understand the state of the business and the technical capacity to eliminate any negative aspects. I had planned to watch for a while, but things didn't work out that way. It all started with a phone call. It was me who responded to it. I almost got my eardrum damaged when I was shouted at before I could even say the name of the company. That's how furious the caller was. We had just delivered a program to Director Smith, a longtime client, and he sent it. Director Smith's call was unexpected because I'm usually extremely calm. When he indicated that the program we delivered had a serious issue and that a section we had discussed updating during the specification meeting hadn't been changed at all in the final product, I was able to calm him down and pay attention. I used the computer to see who was in charge of the project while I listened. Linda's team was in charge of the task. I could tell Linda must have heard the shouting over the receiver since she was staring at me with a pale face as I looked at her in disbelief. A correction with delivery by Lucasoro was urgently needed by the client. Regretfully, Nathan and the sales team were out conducting fieldwork. It was too stressful to even put the client on hold as Linda checked in. "I get it," I said, "we'll begin the corrections right away," and hung up. I set down the receiver, and Linda came running over to me. "Don't accept it by yourself. We can't possibly make the deadline by Lucasoro." Our reputation will suffer if we don't succeed." Linda was still berating me, and her face was white. I got the idea that she was blaming someone else in order to keep her emotional equilibrium. However, this is work. Making excuses or assigning blame is not acceptable. You were in charge of the project, right? How are you going to fix this? I looked directly into Linda's eyes as I asked. She took a step back, as if my intensity intimidated her a little. However, Linda never backs down. She immediately collected herself and roared back at me. "As the project manager, I've calculated that fixing it will take a few days. By guaranteeing delivery by Lucas Aro, are you harboring resentment toward me?" I was out of breath from her forcefulness. It appeared that the client had no time to wait for a few days. Errors in the specification updates are unacceptable, but bugs are another matter. It demonstrates how poorly the project team coordinated. Unable to reply, Linda chewed her bot Lucas lip as I counted. It must be something she knows herself. This needs to be addressed immediately. Please let me know if there is anything I can do to help. What are you able to do? With a sarcastic smirk and a pale face, Linda rejected my offer, saying, "All you've been good for is errands, like some decorative piece." She appeared determined to harass me at every opportunity. I was going to object when my line was interrupted by a voice. "It's a huge error, but we'll be all right with Lucas here. Having a brilliant programmer here makes me happy. I'm depending on you." The client had to have complained directly. Owner Madison's entrance immediately increased the level of attention in the room, and Chris then showed up in the office. Nathan rushed back from his fieldwork, following Chris. "With all due respect, Owner Madison, what makes this individual an exceptional programmer? He hasn't been useful since he joined until today," Linda said mockingly to Chris. "Why don't you take a look?" At Chris's signal, Nathan began to issue commands from this point on. Linda protested with a startled look as he demanded that the software data be sent to me right away. "Are you serious, President Carter? Leaving the adjustment to Lucas rather than me? He's practically worthless." "Even if he had a month," Linda angrily objected. "It's an executive order," Nathan said, dismissing her. Linda was forced to comply with the president's order. She reluctantly forwarded the information to me. A straightforward communication error, a blatant human error, was the cause of the specification change. We will need to get better at this in the future. I went over the received program data. Linda probably created it. It was a software that was feminine, lovely, and adaptable, but it also contained an aberration that appeared to have been purposefully added. I could easily find and fix this. By Lucas Aro, we can meet the deadline. Please check the updated specs. That's how I spoke to Linda without looking away from the television. My fingers kept moving smoothly over the keyboard. Linda paused as she watched the code flow on my screen after taking a short breath as if to clarify what I had said. "How can this be?" she repeated in a low voice, overwhelmed by the software I was developing. "Why, that's a dumb query. They claimed to have employed a brilliant programmer, didn't they?" Linda was taking a breath when Chris spoke to her. Chris talked about my experience working for a large IT firm overseas and how I was hired to help with the present internal crisis in a voice that was loud enough for the other staff members to hear. Nathan has also been informing me on the current situation within the organization. There are far too many people in the top echelons who lack humility and attention to detail in their work. A business with such personnel is not one in which I'd wish to invest. When Chris remarked, "I want Lucas to clean the house. That's what I'm thinking," several faces turned red. Someone most likely set up this purposeful bug to frame Linda. Despite her personality problems, Linda's programming abilities are comparable to Nathan's. She wouldn't typically make such a mistake, in my opinion. Chris gave Linda a shoulder pat and walked out of the office after saying, "I'll provide the funds. Please resolve this issue promptly." She most likely visited the client. "Please help me, Linda," I told Linda, who was still stunned by my statement and in a trance. It's hard for me to meet the deadline alone. Linda jolted back to the present. She reluctantly took a seat next to me and got to work. Her voice was gentle as she said, "Thank you." I'm positive that's what she said, but it was a voice that only I could hear. Even though it took all night, we managed to fix the bug and make the necessary revisions to the specification by the time the sun rose in the morning. I think no other company could match the speed. My shoulders felt as rigid as steel, and my eyes hurt. You performed admirably. We arrived on schedule. Nathan offered me an energy drink and remarked, "I knew I could count on you." There were bags under his eyes, too. Nathan had found the bug's originator and determined a penalty for them while we were fixing it. The perpetrator was a male mid-level worker who was envious of Linda's promotion. He had first met Linda, but he couldn't accept his protégé surpassing him in position and ability. Regardless of your perspective, jealousy is a nasty thing. Have you discussed leaving with him? I inquired about the penalty. Nathan gave a silent nod. I understand. His expression made it clear that the sympathetic Nathan was having a hard time making the choice. Do you want some coffee, President Carter? Linda gently offered Nathan, who was exhausted, coffee. Nathan took it with pleasure. Linda then offered me a cup of coffee without saying anything. Her normally mischievous eyes softened with a smile as I received it with a wry smile. As I relaxed her, Linda's ears flushed. I wish I had a partner who could offer me coffee when I'm tired like this, I said. Nathan didn't mean to offend owner Madison when he stated, "Don't expect that from Chris. She's useless for anything but making money." During the all-nighter, his loving tone made it obvious. Chris called a couple of times. She was keeping the client happy at that wine location by amusing them. Because of her, we worked without being hurried or distracted by complaints. It really was a relief. You say it's finished? Well done. I said, I've finished up on my end too, and threw everything in a cab. Chris walked hesitantly into the office, looking a little inebriated. She said it was a pleasure and gave me a sandwich prepared by the restaurant's chef. It appears that the thermos, which holds heat well, contains soup. For our exhausted bodies, it was a much-needed provision. You seem to have been drinking until just now, don't you? Chris chuckled and said she had no other skills, saying, All I can do is entertain and spend money to make sure no one complains. She smiled at me and continued, but because of this talent, I was able to forcefully draw my destiny towards me. Her unexpected comment caught me off guard, and all I could do was stare in confusion. Intrigued, Linda plunged into the discussion. Are you referring to Lucas as your soulmate? Huh. I was also unaware of this. Take a look at Lucas's face. He looks like a bean-shot pigeon. She stared at me while Chris held her slukasak and giggled. What? What does that signify? Chris put her index finger over her lips and murmured, It's a secret until you remember, with a cunning smirk. I was so tired after the afternoon delivery that I dozed off in the restroom when I had my first dream about the day I was leaving for overseas. A mature-looking girl crossed her face in front of me as my parents said her farewell. I was drawn to her porcelain-like pale complexion and thin chin. The girl gave me a quick smile after that. Am I valuable enough to be looked at in this way? Her inquiry caught me off guard, and I apologized for my impolite gaze. I think you're definitely worth admiring, I replied. She sat down next to me with a thud and murmured, Thank you. That gives me confidence. Then, in the brief period before boarding, she indicated that she wanted to learn more about me. I think we discussed one another. She was traveling to England to find out more about her grandfather's financial district firm, while I was on my way to Oxford University. I remember her laughing as she expressed her one and only wish. I want to live surrounded by things I love, doing what I love. She got up and looked directly into my face when the boarding announcement was made. I designate you as my destined person, she continued. You called me attractive, and now I've determined that you are my objective. Be ready." When I woke up, Chris's face crossed over with the face of the girl who had giggled mischievously. "Good morning, indeed." Chris's voice sounded from right next to me, and I was startled. "Have you got any memories of me? Finding you was quite the undertaking." "Really? Were you trying to find me?" I was so taken aback that I asked the question awkwardly. "Yes, I hired 6 detectives, and it cost me a fortune. I just knew a little bit about Oxford University." After he laughed, Chris told me what she was going to do next. Despite the fact that that stage had long since been surpassed, she stated solemnly, "The second phase of the plan is to make you fall in love with me." What should I tell her about this? When I inform her, how would she probably look? Excited, I picked my words carefully in the hopes that they would be the best response she could receive. We appreciate being here today. I returned to the sales industry over a year later. With a raspy voice, I greeted our client, my mouth starting to dry out. I wanted to flee as my failure from a year ago raced across my head. Susan, my female supervisor, who was standing next to me, gave me a gentle slap on the back at that same moment. I looked at her, and she gave me a comforting nod, as though to assure me that everything would be okay. She gave me encouragement, and I gave my sales speech my all. I had no idea how much meeting her would change my life at the time. Charlie is my name. Up until a year or so ago, I considered my life to be going rather well. I attended a renowned institution right after graduating from a prominent high school, and I then went back to my hometown to work at the Clearwater Bakery Riverside location. I was informed by both friends and university teachers that my degree would help me get a better career, but I had good reasons to go back home. I wanted to spend as much time as possible with my mother, because she was sick all the time. My mother has been raising me alone since my father went away before I entered elementary school. During my time in college, my mother passed away at work, which is why I made the decision to work in my hometown. Although Clearwater Bakery is a national firm, its branch offices are where their locally specific items are created and produced. Fortunately, I was placed in the product development division, just where I had planned to be. I knew a fair amount about the cuisine preferences of the neighborhood because I was a local myself. I helped senior staff members with product development at first, but after 3 years, I started to assume more leadership positions in projects. I got into problems around a year ago, around the time of my 31st birthday. David, my direct boss and the team leader for new product development, and I got into a fight. I think we ought to use pears that are cultivated nearby. I voiced my thoughts of utilizing pears in a novel tart-style pastry, saying that it would encourage local consumption and the quality is significantly better. David scowled and stated, "We are unable to bear any additional expenses. Because of their superior quality, our pastries are already more costly than those of our rivals. Our sales will suffer if we fall behind in the pricing war." He insisted on using imports, which were less expensive. My coworkers agreed with me, but they suggested that I take David's lead. If I had followed their counsel, the story may have ended differently. I was, however, determined to use peers from my area. Following our company's objective of promoting local consumption, I visited several local farms and became increasingly eager to use their produce. I persisted, but David made us cast a team vote, and his side won. In addition, he requested that I leave the department and accused me of purposefully impeding product development. My fate was sealed when it so happened that there was an opening in the sales department at that very moment. In response to David's grievance, I was moved to the 3rd sales division by the management. I was disappointed to be kicked out of product development, but not discouraged. To be honest, I was driven to succeed in sales in order to raise additional funds for my mother's medical expenses. However, my resolve backfired, and I quickly lost the favor of my new supervisor. I spoke with Jim, my manager, over a sales call 3 days after I started working in the 3rd sales division. Since I had no prior sales experience, Jim promised to help me get started. Visiting on a frequent basis is crucial. Jim said, even if we don't see results right away, our perseverance might eventually lead to sales as we made our way to a pharmacy that offered food products in addition to everyday essentials and medications. I tried the sales pitch strategies I had taught over the previous 3 days, but I was nervous on my first sales call. I emphasized the advantages of our new items by drawing on my experience in product development. Jim cut me off with, "Stop with the self-centered sales talk," as the client smiled and listened. They are setting aside time for us. Jim apologized to the customer, and we swiftly left the establishment. It seems that the visit's goal was to welcome the customer and express gratitude for their ongoing business. Jim had already made a phone deal to end the sales discussions. To put it another way, I had squandered their time by restating a previously made agreement. To be honest, I don't think I can trust someone like you with sales. Tomorrow, you'll be doing menial work, Jim said. Despite being in the 3rd sales division, I haven't been invited on any sales calls after that failure. My mother's circumstances prevented me from leaving the job. Therefore, I've been working on menial jobs for the past year. One day, a female employee from Clearwater Bakery's headquarters moved to the 3rd sales division. My name is Susan. Although I'm new here, my title is assistant manager. Therefore, I appreciate your advice and assistance. The worker's name was Susan, and she stood over 10 centimeters taller than me in her pumps. She had almond-shaped eyes and was a striking beauty with well-groomed black hair pulled back in a ponytail. No matter who spoke to her, she would always answer with a kind grin and a compassionate manner. She spoke plainly and with a strong look when it came to business, leaving many staff stunned by the contrast. There were staff rumors that Susan was an elite from headquarters and that she was an assistant manager overseeing the branch's operations while she learned the ropes of management. In fact, not long after she arrived, she gave our sales staff a new perspective by coolly putting out the idea, "I have a proposal," and introducing a sales strategy that is employed in the corporate office. Susan had graduated from a very distinguished university too, but her life had been entirely different from mine. She seemed like such a faraway person, so when she came up to me during lunch on her 3rd day, I was taken aback. "I take it you're Charlie. Why don't you make sales calls?" she inquired politely. She looked about my age, but she was above me because she was the assistant manager. Resolving not to offend, I stood up straight and hesitantly answered, "Well, I'm mainly in charge of menial tasks." I stated that I hadn't been taken on any sales calls since my mistake a year ago, when she questioned what I meant by that. She gave a small nod and replied, "I understand." "Thank you," I said as I turned to go. I was a little let down because I believed that our paths would never cross again. But throughout the course of the following week, Susan and I communicated often. Her major topic, whether it was for menial jobs or not, was the limited edition products that the Riverside branch manufactured. She believed that because of my experience in product development and my position in the sales division, I could offer in-depth analysis of regional products. Her smile was as bright as a child's as she enjoyed a piece of bread from the area. "Of course I know the product data, but hearing from the person who developed them is invaluable," she remarked. I appreciated Susan's impartial treatment of me in spite of the fact that I had been shunned since my failure a year prior. Susan asked Jim directly 10 days after her arrival whether she might make sales calls by herself. After studying the managerial responsibilities under him, Jim nodded after a brief hesitation. "As you have finished our training program, there is no problem." "All right, you'll be guided by someone." Susan dismissive waved her hand and said, "I'll accompany Charlie. Putting talent to waste is a waste. I want him to have some sales experience. Jim, is it all right?" She convinced Jim with a smile that was both kind and demanding. Jim groaned reluctantly and added, "Now, Charlie, it's your turn." "Don't make a mistake," she resignedly told me. Startled by this unanticipated chance, I got up and said, "Yes, I'll get ready right away," assembling the required supplies before Susan and I left the office. Of course, I got into the driver's seat of the company vehicle. We have an appointment with Parker's Market, but there is still some time, so let's stop by a nearby branch first, as long as we make it to their headquarters by 11. Susan said while glancing at her phone from the passenger seat. Her tone had been so kind before that it had almost overwhelmed me with clarity and decisiveness. She must be working in this mode. Local supermarket company Parker's Market was based in my neighborhood. Susan had just relocated here and hadn't had time to explore Parker's Market in detail. She pleaded, "I want to see what products they have with my own eyes," which directed me to park at one of their locations. We visited the store for around 20 minutes before rushing to the Parker's Market headquarters. John, the store salesperson, politely ushered us into the meeting room despite our unexpected visit. We made small talk and presented our gifts before getting ready to begin the business conversation. I started, "Thank you for having us," but I was having trouble speaking smoothly because my mouth was dry. My failure from a year ago was still fresh in my mind. This time, I might lose my job if I failed again. I felt Susan's kind pat on my back as I felt nervous. "If anything happens, I'll back you up," she had said to me in the car on our way here, and I remembered her words. "Put everything into it. Rest assured, I've got you covered." Feeling obligated to pay Susan back for granting me this opportunity, I steeled myself and handed John the prepared documents. "We've brought a new bread today that we intend to launch. It smells more like wheat and has a more elastic texture than our previous offerings, as the data shows." I motioned to Susan, and she quickly removed samples of the bread, sliced them into little pieces, and presented them to John. John sampled the bread and nodded. "Wheat fans will find this enticing, in fact. It has a fantastic texture and should taste much better when toasted." Detecting his curiosity, I made the decision to use the information we had learned at the Parker Market branch. "You do realize that Parker Market sells vegetable jams that local farmers collaborate to make. These jams seem like a perfect match for this bread. How do you feel?" Susan arranged the 5 varieties of vegetable jams we had previously bought from Parker's Market on the table as though she had been waiting for my words. After trying each jam on the small bread pieces, John declared, "This is great. These jams go very well with the intense wheat aroma of your bread because they are made to bring out the natural taste of the ingredients with very little spice. This is outstanding. I wish I could sell them together." He commented on how well the bread and vegetable jams went together. Seeing my opportunity, I started showing John each new product one after the other. John repeatedly nodded in appreciation as I went beyond just summarizing the facts in the handouts to provide more thorough explanations. He ended the conversation, which lasted for about 2 hours, by saying, "I appreciate you bringing out such amazing things. We'll be placing larger orders for a range of other goods in addition to the bread. We are eager to collaborate with you more closely." We had succeeded in not just selling the bread, which was our main objective, but also in expanding the range and amount of goods Parker's Market would stock. I gaped openly at the surprising result as I stood there. Susan gave me a quick pat on the back and added, "I appreciate your unwavering support. We're excited to collaborate with you," she said, bending her head. I took her lead and bowed too, appreciating the success of our sales effort, and said, "We appreciate your support." While returning to the Riverside branch by car, Susan expressed her admiration. "Even though I knew you were capable, I wasn't prepared for how well you could sell the products, especially after I called on you at such short notice. How did you manage to articulate the product so well?" Susan, as it turned out, had intended me to relive the sales experience in preparation for my return to the field, but she had not anticipated such a positive result. I still communicate with the individuals that work in the product development division. During the product development phase, they frequently asked me to sample new items. They trusted my palate, even though I was a novice, I said. My friends in product development viewed me as one of their own even after I was moved to the sales department, and they frequently came to me for guidance on new items. We pitched breads at Parker's Market today that I had eaten in depth when they were being developed, so I could give John specifics that weren't in the literature. I see, it makes sense. Susan said, her face proud. In any case, you may go back to the office with your head held high now. It pleased me to see her content. I was happier that Susan was content than that the sales figures were good. When we got back to the workplace, Susan told the third sales division members about our accomplishment, which stunned them. Susan, though, kept her cool and remarked, "If you're not sure, give John a call at Parker's Market. He will extol the virtues of the presentation. Sure, he might have failed once, but he has the skills to succeed in negotiations like today," she said with a composed smile before turning to face me. "Isn't it better to foster an environment where gifted individuals like Charlie can flourish rather than discarding him for a single error?" she inquired of Jim. Susan's advocacy made it possible for me to join the other staff on sales calls the next day. I worked hard to take advantage of the chance Susan had given me starting the following day and continued doing so for the next 6 months. Even during my time in product development and during my university admission examinations, I didn't think I had ever worked this hard. I was able to set one of the highest sales records in the third sales division 6 months later as a result. I had heard a rumor at the time that Susan would be returning to the headquarters shortly. I might never see her again if that were to happen. Desperate, I decided to properly thank her for providing me the opportunity to go on a sales call a year later, so one day during lunch break, I asked her to dinner. I thought she would say no, but she grinned and said yes. We had dinner at a fancy French restaurant close to the station after work, sitting across from one other. "I've been able to establish myself as a member of the sales team because of the chance you offered me. I sincerely appreciate it," I bowed profoundly. Susan laughed quietly and shook her head not long after our toast. "I merely offered you the opportunity to move forward. Everything else is a result of your skill and diligence. You did a great job," she said, warmly complimenting me in a tone that was distinct from her normal working one. I posed the question I'd been dying to ask, and her more conversational voice made my heart skip a beat. "Why did you offer me the opportunity in the past? I've always been curious as to what caught your attention while I was a menial employee." Susan fell silent and stared blankly into space. Her almond-shaped eyes then widened, and she remarked, in a tone that hinted at playfulness, "Maybe because you reminded me of my younger self." She started talking about her personal experiences. "In school, I used to play volleyball. When I started high school, I was immediately chosen as the ace because of my physique and passable athleticism. However, not everyone was amused by that, and I encountered some bullying from seniors and classmates." We both took a drink of our wine refills as they arrived. Susan let out a deep breath and went on. During a meeting, a senior member raised his hand and asked why I was being singled out for criticism when everyone knew I was capable. She claimed that if I gave it my all, the team would win. Susan hesitated, scowled a little, and shook her head. I had taken that senior starting spot. She only stated it was the proper thing to do when I questioned later why she stood up for me. I made the decision to always assist someone in a similar circumstance after being profoundly impacted. I thanked her for sharing this and remarked, "So, that's how it was." Susan responded, dismissively waving her hand, "Don't worry, it's really just for my personal satisfaction. More significantly, based on what I had heard about your job as a menial worker and in product development, I thought you possessed the necessary skills and assigned you to that negotiation." I had no idea that she had been researching me. She genuinely embodies what a manager ought to be. In spite of her hectic schedule, she made the time to inquire about the background of one particular subordinate. She clasped her hands and exclaimed, "Oh, by the way, I heard that the product development team is rallying to have you back," before I could say anything to her. They appear prepared to accept you. Do you intend to come back? About a subject that had only been discussed inside, she inquired. I was surprised she knew about it and said, I'm not sure what to think. Although I am aware that working on products is rewarding, I am now enjoying my position in sales. And most importantly, like that day 6 months ago, I gulped hard and gave myself a boost. If I didn't say it right away, I would regret it. I said, right now, I don't want to be apart from you, looking Susan in the eye with the will to prevent that regret. I want to work for you for as long as possible. Hence, I want to stay in the sales department. I was direct in my honest feelings. Susan's face flushed, maybe from what I had said, and she responded, I'm startled. Could you elaborate on that a little? Her frightened eyes filled with tears as she urged, I don't want to misunderstand in a weird way. I clarified that while at first I had respect and adoration for her, working with her turned into a priceless experience. I told her quite really that I wanted to go through life with her now. Susan inhaled deeply, then turned to face me and said, I'm heading back to the headquarters shortly. When that occurs, I'll recommend that you be assigned to the headquarters as well, to the benefit of both the Riverside branch and the headquarters. Her statement startled me by offering to be sent to the headquarters, while also confirming the reports. What does that mean exactly? Perplexed, I asked. Charlie, you once said that if you ever went back to product development, you'd want to be involved in developing nationwide products, not just local ones, Susan continued, lifting her hand to indicate that I should wait. She then smiled gently. The product development department at headquarters is seeking fresh talent. They were excited to have you when I indicated that I had a potential employee with sales and product development skills. I was really excited as I listened to her. It brought back memories of a chat we had over lunch. Even though I now understood the excitement of sales, I still desired to go back to product development in the future. My real goal was to work with Clearwater Bakery to develop items that would be available across the country. I'm very pleased with the proposal, but how does this relate to what I just confessed? Perplexed, I asked. With a sardonic smile, she said, You're surprisingly stupid. It indicates that I share your feelings. Together, let's work at the headquarters as a couple. She looked at me with dropped eyes and said, Of course, I remember you telling me about your mother, so I won't force you if it's too difficult. I bowed fervently, saying, Thank you very much, amazed that my sincere confession had been accepted, only to bang my forehead on the table. Charlie, you're unexpectedly clumsy, Susan replied, softly touching my red forehead while trying not to giggle at my clumsiness. That's also adorable. From now on, let's get to know each other better, she said as she softly touched my flushed forehead. Once I dated Susan, I was really bothered by the assignment to headquarters. I really wanted to work at headquarters, and her suggestion was quite appealing. She had suggested it, and I had been itching to get started right away. I did, however, feel bad for abandoning my sick mother. Susan saw my predicament and offered an unexpected suggestion. Let's discuss everything with your mother. Like you, I want to meet her. After that, she arrived at the apartment where my mother and I shared. The abrupt introduction of my girlfriend startled my mother, but she soon warmed up to Susan's no-nonsense demeanor, saying, He's a bit unreliable, but please take care of him. After the introductions, Susan made another unexpected comment, obviously delighted with herself. Would you consider relocating to Tokyo with us, ma'am? There would be more hospital options in Tokyo. We will, of course, respect your choice to remain here. However, I'm not ready to give up on him or my work. Why didn't I bring my mother along if I was anxious about leaving her behind? I had never thought about that concept before. Susan calmly went over everything with my mother, filling her in on all the specifics. My mother turned to face me, listening, nodding, saying, Don't worry about me. The two of you travel to Tokyo. I've gotten enough from you. She pulled a bank book out of the cabinet in the living room and gave it to me. "This is the cash you sent me to cover my medical expenses. Take it with you. I've kept it all for you. You must be serious about getting married if you came to introduce her to me. Here you go. You'll need money for a variety of things." I had given my mother some money for hospital fees, and she had been saving it to give back to me eventually. It would be the same as rejecting her goodwill to refuse it. I said, "Thank you," and took the bank book in both hands. "I'll try my hardest." Warmth rising in my chest, I pronounced myself determined. Susan, in the meantime, held my mother's hand and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am," in a voice that was shaking from crying. Regarding the headquarters, Susan and I were recognized for our efforts in sales and product development after achieving exceptional results in our respective areas. My background in regional product development and sales was a major factor in my success in creating multiple successful items. Susan and I moved in together and shared a roof a year after I started working at the headquarters. Susan was using her vacation days wisely now, as she was planning for what was ahead. We found out she was pregnant less than a month after our wedding. "I want to make sure that this baby has everything he needs." As she saw me go, looking every bit a mother, Susan remarked, "Don't worry, your mother will be coming soon, so you can go to work with peace of mind," softly rubbing her belly. "All right, I'm off," I murmured, and I stepped on tiptoe to give my wife a kiss. I went back to work with a newfound sense of purpose, determined to make Susan and our child happy, since they had altered my life. Every day, I sensed that my sense of duty as a husband and father was deepening.
"James, the CEO, wants to talk to you, and Michael is with him too. It seems you're finally being let go. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy." As I headed to the CEO's office through the elevator in the hallway, I was engulfed in gloom. When I entered the CEO's office, just as my subordinate had said, Mr. Smith and department head Michael were there. "You don't fit in our company, you're fired." Hearing this sudden dismissal from Mr. Smith, Michael sitting beside me raised the corners of his mouth, bursting into a smile of joy. "But then, are you perhaps misunderstanding something?" The true nature of this dismissal that he revealed next was shockingly unexpected. "I am James. This year I turned 37. Just an ordinary company employee, I now live in a corner of New York, originally from a rural area in Idaho. Maybe it's because I was nurtured in a generous and leisurely countryside environment, though it's a bit odd to say about myself. I've never been able to become as cool and detached as city folks. Always siding with those in trouble or in a weaker position, a man of deep compassion. I went to school in Royal Idaho until high school and then attended a mid-tier private university in New York. During my college years, I worked various part-time jobs and eventually got a job at an ID company, which at the time was barely more than a startup. Before I knew it, 15 years had passed as I struggled and worked at this company. The company, which was small when I joined, has grown into a mid-sized ID trading company. As a mid-level manager and the head of the system development section at our New York headquarters, my work environment is far from ideal, to say the least. Being a head in name only, I'm constantly caught between the demands of my superiors and the needs of my subordinates, a classic example of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Especially among my subordinates, many are from prestigious universities, making them generally difficult to handle. Among them, some subordinates have very high self-esteem and self-confidence, and they are very assertive. Therefore, as a mediocre supervisor with a significantly lower educational background than theirs, I often sense their defiance and mockery towards my instructions, even if they don't express it openly. In other words, they look down on me as their head. Moreover, my direct superior, the head of the system development section, Michael, is a typical opportunist who climbed the career ladder just by being savvy. Michael tends to delegate all important or complex tasks to his subordinates, leaving everything to others while he takes all the credit for himself. These troublesome subordinates and superiors are mostly from the prestigious private university Key University, forming an unbearable internal clique. Michael often says to me, "James, your alma mater university is like the typical fallback university for us Key University graduates, isn't it? It's sad you must be harbouring such a complex." Michael would say this out loud, ensuring I heard it, and then the subordinates from Key University would laugh mockingly at me, even though it wasn't funny at all. Indeed, my alma mater university is not highly ranked and is considered a safe school for students aiming for prestigious universities like Key University. I too had applied to prestigious universities, but ended up at university as my safety option. So, Michael's sarcastic comments often struck a chord with me. In this hostile office environment, my oasis was Elizabeth, who recently started working as a cleaner in our office. Elizabeth, not yet accustomed to her job, often made mistakes and seemed lost on the floor, which led to some mean-spirited younger employees clicking their tongues or harassing her openly. However, as I mentioned earlier, being raised in the countryside has instilled in me a nature that can't ignore those invulnerable positions. Gradually, I found myself discreetly helping Elizabeth when she seemed to be struggling with her cleaning tasks and started to strike up friendly conversations with her. Elizabeth wore a large cleaner's hat, pulled down over her eyes, and a big mask, making it hard to see her face, but she seemed to be quite elderly. She warmed up to me as I helped her out and started making small talk, sharing stories from her life that were both interesting and insightful. Indeed, the stories from Elizabeth, who has lived through many years and is a senior in life, were interesting and full of wisdom. In the midst of the hostile work environment that left me feeling on edge, the casual chats with Elizabeth gradually became an irreplaceable form of relaxation for me. However, my subordinates in the system development section, especially those in the Key University clique led by Michael, openly mocked us. Seeing me, with my lower education, happily chatting with the cleaner Elizabeth, they would say loudly enough for us to hear, "Low-educated old man and an old lady, perfect match at the bottom." On one such day, after working late at the office and feeling completely drained, I finally made it to the nearest station to my company. As I passed through the ticket gate and was descending the stairs to the platform, a wallet flew out of the bag of an elderly woman walking slightly ahead of me and fell to the ground. However, the elderly lady didn't notice and continued to hurry towards the platform. I immediately made my way through the crowd, picked up the fallen wallet, looked up, and frantically searched for her. To my relief, I found her already lined up at the boarding area of the platform. It was a platform for a train heading in the opposite direction to mine. I need to get this wallet back to that elderly lady quickly. In the midst of the rush hour crowd, I hurried down the stairs to the platform as fast as I could. But, unfortunately, the train was already pulling in. The train doors opened all at once, and the elderly lady boarded. No choice, it's going the opposite way, but I'll have to get on that train. Desperate. I raced down the stairs and barely managed to slip through the doors just as they were closing, boarding the train heading in the opposite direction to my home. Once on, I found the train packed to the brim with commuters. I had seen the elderly lady with the lost wallet board the next car over. I have to get this wallet to her before she gets off, while receiving some annoyed looks and tisks from other passengers. I apologized profusely and slowly made my way through the crowded car towards the next one. By the time I reached the elderly lady's car, 2 stations had passed. As I quickly explained how I found her wallet and came to return it, the elderly lady looked incredibly surprised. Though she appeared quite elderly, she seemed energetic and had a kind, refined face. What struck me was how her eyes widened in shock the moment she saw me. "You are such a kind person to go out of your way to return a lost wallet by boarding a train going in the opposite direction of your home." The elderly lady was so moved, thanking me repeatedly, that I became embarrassed and modestly replied, "Oh, it was nothing, just doing what anyone would." Just then, as the train was stopping at the second station, I said, "Well, this is my stop," and bid the elderly lady goodbye before hopping off the train. Having taken the train in the wrong direction, I decided to wait on the opposite platform for a train going back the way I came. That's when something strange occurred to me. How did that elderly lady know I took the train in the opposite direction, despite not having mentioned anything about myself? The elderly lady somehow knew I had taken the train in the opposite direction to return her wallet. Life is full of mysteries. With a puzzled shake of my head, I boarded the train home. The next day, as I arrived at work, as usual, my colleague Brian rushed over to my desk. "James, thank you so much. The proposal you advised me on last week, I presented it as you instructed, and we got the contract. And this morning, Mr. Smith personally called me to commend me for it. All thanks to you. Honestly, I had always thought Brian was one of those who looked down on me with a bad attitude, so his sudden change took me by surprise. I had advised Brian on numerous occasions, and this wasn't the first time a deal had gone through, but it was the first time he had expressed gratitude and thanked me like this. Being praised by Mr. Smith personally, really such a game changer. Sensing my skepticism, Brian added, "Yeah, James, the reason I came to thank you is that he told me to." He said, "This successful deal is thanks to James, a competent and exemplary supervisor. Make sure you thank him properly." Watching Brian walk away, I muttered to myself, why would he? That day was just the beginning, and from the next day on, the atmosphere around me at work began to change significantly. Without altering my work style or approach from the previous week, good news and results started coming my way, one after another. Specifically, one of our long-standing clients approached us with a proposal to embark on a major project together, and to my surprise, they nominated me as the person in charge from our company. Having worked here for about 15 years, this was the first time I had been specifically requested for a project. In the past, even if I did high-quality work, someone else always seemed to take the credit or obstruct my efforts. It felt like I had gone from being a symbol of misfortune to someone basking in the limelight. I asked Jessica, the client's representative, why she chose me as the lead person for our company, despite there being other employees available. Jessica replied, "It was because Mr. Smith recommended you." He assured us that if it's James from the System Development Department, there can be no mistake. "We took the liberty of looking into your past achievements and, true to his word, found you to be an exceptionally capable individual." I was taken aback to hear once again that he had played a role in this. So, my once luckless corporate life seemed to be taking a turn for the better recently, lifting my spirits and making me grin to myself. Being appointed as the person in charge of an unprecedentedly large project for a client filled me with enthusiasm, and I dived into the preparations. This project was undoubtedly the biggest opportunity in my career, and its success would significantly enhance my reputation. I was brimming with motivation. Day after day, I stayed late at the office, fully focused on preparing for this project, creating specifications for the newly developed program, drafting various explanatory documents, preparing for presentations. I was giving it my all, drawing on every bit of strength I had. After a month of such dizzyingly busy and fulfilling days, the final presentation, where I would meet all the clients, was just 2 days away. After tirelessly working through sleepless nights, I managed to complete the new system and nearly finished the specification documents and the extensive materials for business negotiations by yesterday. On the day before the presentation, I arrived at work, trying to contain my excitement, and launched the newly completed system for a trial run. Then, I tried to open the specification document file stored on my PC, along with other files for the business negotiation presentation. But they were gone. All the files had been deleted. Moreover, all the backup files I had made as a precaution were also erased. Even more, all the documents I had printed out and piled up next to my PC just the day before had vanished without a trace. This can't be happening. What on earth is going on? I felt a chill run down my spine and couldn't help but shout out loud in panic. I searched under my desk and in my drawers, desperately looking for the stacks of documents, but they were nowhere to be found. As I was doing this, drawn by my earlier shout, some people came over, laughing amorously. When I turned towards the source of the crude laughter, there was Michael and his entourage looking down on me with scorn. Too bad all those documents you worked so hard on, and the files on your PC. This guy threw them all away. Michael, seemingly finding the situation hilarious, burst into laughter, pointing at David, a junior employee. David was a newcomer, but, like Michael, he was from Key University and had a nasty personality, acting like Michael's lackey. I thought your files and documents were garbage, just like you. So I deleted all the files along with the backups and threw all the paper stacks into the shredder bin. As David made his flippant remark, Michael and the rest of the group burst into uncontrollable laughter. Haha, it's hilarious, right? Threw them all away. Now James can do his presentation. Bye-bye, business deal. Oh dear, such a big project has gone to waste. What a pity. Michael and his cronies mocked and tormented me, making a laughingstock out of me. Glaring at Michael and David, who had deleted the files, I said, "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Aren't you ashamed of yourselves for stooping to such despicable actions?" To which David brazenly replied, "Not at all. We have to nip in the bud any bad influence from our incompetent seniors, or it's us, the juniors, who end up getting crushed." Ha, getting told off by the newbie. But James, you've been getting a bit too cocky lately because you've been recognized a bit. You were an eyesore, so we just gave you a reality check. Go ahead and embarrass yourself in the business meeting and revert back to your mediocre self. And don't you dare get ahead of yourself ever again. Michael, seizing the moment, then added, "It is true feelings." Hearing Michael's appalling words, I realized everything. Michael, the department head of system development, was deeply resentful that I, a mere supervisor, had been appointed by the client for a big project, bypassing him. I felt his actions were clearly driven by ugly jealousy towards me. Stunned by their actions and responses, I was left speechless as Michael, with a parting shot of, "Let this be a lesson. Never overstep again, you worthless supervisor," walked away with his entourage from my desk. As I watched their retreating figures with a sense of despair, I muttered to myself, all the backup files were deleted and all the documents were thrown away. I could start over from scratch, but there's absolutely no way I can finish before the day after tomorrow's business meeting. It's all over. How could I have been so careless? I blame myself for leaving my PC unlocked and for carelessly leaving the documents by my desk. Feeling a sense of futility in hindsight, the next day I went to work feeling utterly despondent. With the business meeting now seemingly doomed, my spirit had hit rock bottom, and I was overwhelmed with depression. Barely able to stand, unable to focus on work, I went to the break room alone, repeatedly sighing and holding my head in my hands embarrassingly. I felt a lump in my throat from my own inadequacy. Then someone patted my shoulder. Looking up, I saw Elizabeth, the cleaner, looking at me with concern. "Elizabeth, sorry, I'm not really in the mood for small talk right now." As I said this, Elizabeth smiled kindly, with just her eyes showing. Then she presented something she had been hiding behind her back. To my astonishment, it was the stack of documents I had printed out, which were supposed to have been thrown away by David. The specification documents for the new system, the materials for the presentation, and all the documents for the business negotiations were all there, intact. "Elizabeth, where did you find these?" Surprised, I asked. And Elizabeth replied, "The day before yesterday, when I was collecting trash, I found a large stack of documents in the bin for shredding, which isn't usually there. It seemed odd, so I checked and saw they were the documents you've been working so hard on every day. I thought to myself that I couldn't let such important things be shredded, so I collected and saved them all." Right there at that moment, Elizabeth appeared to me like a saint. "Elizabeth, thank you so much. With these, I can go ahead with tomorrow's presentation and negotiation. You saved me at the last minute. You're my saviour, Elizabeth. Thank you." Overwhelmed with gratitude, I couldn't help but rejoice as Elizabeth watched me with a pleased expression, nodding repeatedly as she spoke. What goes around comes around. "You're my saviour after all." Faced with Elizabeth's cryptic remark, I looked at her in bewilderment, only to see her chuckle amusingly in response. The following day, I was able to attend a presentation for the big project we were working on with our client, and thanks to the documents I managed to conduct a successful presentation. The subsequent negotiations also ended in great success, leading to contracts with several major client companies. It turned out to be one of the largest deals in the history of my company. I wanted to share this great success with Elizabeth, who had saved the documents before anyone else. When I happily arrived at work the next day, I was greeted by David, one of Michael's spiteful followers. David said to me with a sneer, "James, Mr. Smith wants to talk to you, and Michael is joining him. It seems, James, you are finally being let go." Still buzzing from the success of yesterday's negotiations, David's words felt like a cold shower. Just when I thought I was finally in a position to shine, my joy was short-lived, and now I was being fired. David mentioned that Michael was also in the CEO's office. Probably Michael had framed the deletion of my files as a result of my mishandling. That must have led to discussions of my dismissal due to a supposed lack of confidentiality management skills. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the CEO's office, pondering over these thoughts in the elevator and the hallway. I knocked and entered the CEO's office. Upon entering, just as David had said, Mr. Smith and Michael were there. "Ah, James, you've come. Take a seat." Mr. Smith gestured for me to sit. Then unexpectedly he said, "You're not suited for our company. You're fired." I thought to myself in shock, this is so sudden, and screamed internally. Hearing Mr. Smith's abrupt announcement, Michael sitting next to me grinned with joy. Although I was prepared for the worst, the injustice of it all filled me with an unbearable sense of frustration. I couldn't help but question Mr. Smith. "Mr. Smith, I'm fully aware that I hadn't performed perfectly. I apologize. However, I have always worked diligently for this company. Isn't a sudden dismissal too harsh? Could you at least explain the reason?" Cutting off my plea, Mr. Smith said, Hold on, James. It seems you're misunderstanding something. I wasn't talking about firing you. I exclaimed in surprise at Mr. Smith's unexpected response. James, you're a treasure to our company. Firing you would be a loss for us. I was talking about firing Michael. At Mr. Smith's words, Michael was taken aback. What are you saying, Mr. Smith? Why would you fire me, the manager, instead of this incompetent supervisor? Even at this point, Michael didn't hold back his disdain for me. It's quite the opposite. And Michael, why do you think it's only fair for you to be fired? You should know best, don't you? Come now, Mr. Smith shouted towards the secretary's office. Then the door to the secretary's office opened, and in came Elizabeth. Seeing her, Michael was the first to react angrily. The cleaning lady, hey, we're having an important conversation here. Don't just barge in. Despite being yelled at by Michael, Elizabeth retorted, Old lady, who do you think you're talking to? With that, Elizabeth removed her mask and hat, which she never took off in public, upon seeing her face. I couldn't help but exclaim, it was definitely a face I recognized. It's you, the lady who dropped her wallet on the train that time. When I tentatively asked, Elizabeth smiled warmly and replied, Yes, thank you so much for that time. Thanks to you, I didn't lose my important cash cards and driver's license. You're my saviour. To think that the elegant elderly lady I encountered that time was the cleaning staff I chatted with every day. Seeing my speechless surprise, Mr. Smith added with a smile, Indeed, James. I also want to thank you for returning my mother's wallet. Though belated, I appreciate it. It seemed Michael was the most shocked by Mr. Smith's words. My mother? Wait, is this lady really your mother? As Michael's face turned pale with shock, Mr. Smith reprimanded him sharply. Watch your mouth, Michael. You've been slandering someone's mother by calling her an old lady. It's because of your twisted personality that you're utterly unfit for our company. Michael, scolded by Mr. Smith, began to tremble with fear, his face turning even paler. After giving Michael a disdainful glance, Elizabeth began to explain the situation. The details were as follows. The mother, wanting to contribute to Hiram's company in some way, decided to utilize her cleaning skills and began working as a cleaner. While working as a cleaner, she observed the office staff and their characters. During this time, Elizabeth was drawn to my work ethic and character. After the incident with the wallet, she had even suggested to her son that my promotion and performance evaluation be reconsidered. Moreover, Elizabeth had been keeping an eye on Michael's tyrannical behaviour and had reported everything, including the truth about the negotiation documents, to Mr. Smith. That was the essence of it. During Elizabeth's explanation, Michael's trembling grew worse, and he eventually collapsed to his knees on the floor, completely overwhelmed. This was truly a sight of utter defeat. Looking down at the pitiful sight of Michael, Mr. Smith said calmly, Michael, you are truly despicable. Today, you're being dismissed for disciplinary reasons. But before that, apologize to James for all the trouble you've caused him, if you have any shred of conscience left as a human being. Michael, crouching on the floor and holding his head weakly, looked up and said, James, I'm sorry for all the mean things I've done. Watching Michael break down and sob, I felt a profound sense of pity. In the end, Michael's wrongdoings were brought to light, and the board of directors unanimously decided to dismiss him for disciplinary reasons. Michael left, but his followers remained in the company. Ironically, the very next day, those who were part of Michael's faction came to me one after the other, apologizing for their past rudeness and insults. Following these events, I was promoted to the head of the System Development Department in the next personnel change. Thus, peace returned to the department. The lesson from this entire experience was that those who extend a helping hand to others in need will find others willing to help them in their own times of need. Elizabeth repaid the favour of me returning her wallet with a significant act of saving crucial documents for a business deal. It was a true realisation of the saying, kindness begets kindness. Half a year has passed since then. As the new department head, I continue to have a good relationship with Elizabeth, Mr. Smith's mother, who still works as a cleaner from time to time. And we often enjoy chatting together as a break from work. Now, with trust from the subordinates, and favoured by Mr. Smith, I lead a smooth and successful life, a stark contrast to the unfortunate first half of my life.